Okay, well, welcome back from the break. This morning, we covered topics like the application structure, the application patterns, screen patterns, UI controls, and now we're going to kind of put a microscope into a finer part of the application, and it's something that we call interesting moments. I'll explain what that means in just a minute, but we'll talk about 6 principles around rich interaction design. Okay, a lot of words to unpack, but we'll unpack them. So this is an example from iGoogle. And if you notice, it's back to that portal pattern that Theresa talked about earlier. And we're able to drag and drop the modules, right? And when you first look at this from a design perspective, I think the first thing you think of is, we're all pretty used to drag and drop now. So it seems pretty simple. So simple interaction is kind of the conclusion you come to. When I was working at Yahoo and we were getting ready to put together a JavaScript library, which we called Yahoo User Interface Library. Amazing name, clever name, right? YUI. We wanted to figure out how to do drag and drop so that developers could write application sites that had drag and drop that would satisfy all the needs of the designers. So we wanted to think about what were all the possible cases that you might want to do something during a drag and drop operation. And so as I started taking notes. Pretty soon I had 20 pages, 25 pages, 30 pages. I said, okay, I didn't sign up to be a scribe, so I need a better way to kind of visualize this. And but what happened was, as I started thinking about it, I realized in a drag and drop operation, there are a lot of events, a lot of happenings, a lot of things that go on. And these, if you kind of start thinking about them, like when the page loads itself, when you draw the page, you could actually put something on the page to let you know that you can drag and drop, for example. Or when you start to drag an item over where you're going to drop it, or whether it's somewhere that's not valid to drop it. These are all places. These are all events in time. So there's at least 16 of those in a drag and drop operation. So it gets a little more complicated when you start thinking about that. Then you start thinking about there's at least 6 different elements on the page, or actors or objects that can get involved in a drag and drop operation. Like I said, the page, you could put, some kind of a indication that you can drag and drop. You could make the object itself be dimpled, right? So it's got some sort of a surface you can pull on. You could change the cursor when you hover over it. When you put the events and the actors together into a grid, running the events along the top, if you just think about the events going this way and the actors going down this way, you actually have 96 different permutations, 96 different interesting moments of time, right? And so the aha for me when I was trying to document this was to create an interaction grid, and we call it interesting moments because I think the phrase interesting moments teases out something really important because it changes you from thinking about drag and drop to thinking about the user. You think about these moments of engagement that you can do something or not do something, just like in music. You can play a note or you can have a rest, right? And the rest is just as important as the note, the length of the note, etc. And the same way in an interaction when we start putting a microscope. And really what we're going to do here in this part of the talk, this part of the workshop, is really pull a microscope out and look at things like drag and drop and in-page editing and look at the microstates, the real small interactions, and think about all the possibilities. And you'll see that lots of people have gone into troubled waters and trying to do these sort of interactions, and it still happens all the time. I keep thinking when I give this talk, it should be the last time I have to give the talk because it seems kind of obvious. Once you've given a talk or talked about something for a long time, of course the material seems obvious. But I see large sites, with really good designers continue to crank out stuff that is something I call anti-patterns. We'll talk about that in a minute, patterns and anti-patterns. So if you look at this interesting moments interaction with iGoogle and just put it in this grid, you can see that I put the events along here, the ones that they use in this drag and drop. Mouse hover, mouse down, drag initiated, cursor, drag module, these are the actors. And you can see that there's points in time when they're not doing anything, which is maybe good, maybe not, depending on how you want to do it. So, here I changed the hand to a cursor, to a hand cursor. And now when you start to drag, they actually go back to a normal cursor. You could have a little grabby hand, so it looks like it's grabbed, right? That's something different you could do there. Here they ghost the element that they're dragging around, which gives an indication that it's something that you're experimenting with. You haven't kind of locked it in yet. That's what that kind of opacity change level can do. And then, they have a dotted line to ripped out point, and then it gets dropped and moved into place. So you can see how the actual interaction maps back to this interesting moments grid. So what is interaction? You know, interaction is this kind of interplay. It's this reciprocal back and forth. And you know, when you're starting to think about these really detailed microstates, these interactions in an interface, it's really kind of like telling a story. You're doing it at a very micro level. If you think about, you know, comic books, right? There's a great book called Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud that talks about the art and craft of actually creating comics. And, you know, the human brain can do a lot of tweening in between key frames in a comic book strip or in an animation, which is the whole field of animation, right? And so the same way, when we're designing these interactions, we can do things, you know, in an interaction that clues you to something else that's going to happen or tells you what happened, all by just the way we use those key frames and those interesting moments. This goes way back, you know, 1,000 years. You're stained glass telling a story, you know, and the brain can fill in the gaps, the tweens in between. So sequence does tell a story, and that's what you have to sort of think about when you're building interesting moments in these interactions. Chris Crawford has a book on game design called Interactive Storytelling. And I like the last part of this phrase, that quote, is listens, thinks, and speaks. This is what interactivity is about. It's about this back and forth listening, thinking, and speaking. And if an interface is not listening, processing that, and speaking back something relevant to you, then it's not a very intelligent interface. And that's kind of the key to intelligence, a rich interface, is it returning really relevant stuff to you. In essence, kind of like opening a pipeline of relevancy back to you. So it's not just, you know, stale information, but it's something that's just in time, that's just right based on your response. And we as humans gauge intelligence based on that. You know, I'm looking at each of you in the audience, and you know, when I look at you, if I stare long enough, you'll smile back or something like that. I tease that out of you, see. Well, that's a sign of intelligence. See, Theresa, you're really smart. You smiled at me when I looked at you. You know? And so, you know, if we don't get that response, we know something's, you know, we say, stupid computer, you know, right? Because it's not responding.